Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to Lean in Olympia. This is a show hosted by Interfaith Works. Interfaith Works is a nonprofit organization here in Olympia, Washington. We have two main focuses for our organization. One is interfaith relations, which is we are a coalition of over 30 multi-faith and spiritual communities that seek to do justice and good in wider Thurston County area. We also have a homeless services aspect of our organization that houses high vulnerability adults and works to promote justice issues around homelessness in Olympia. This show is a bi-weekly show that seeks to stand in the crossroads of humanity, justice, and belief. And if you want to check out past episodes, this is the third episode. You can stay up to date with what Interfaith Works is doing and this show by checking out our website, interfaith-works.org, or check us out on our Facebook page or YouTube channel. So today we are very excited to welcome Malika Lamont. Hello, Malika.
Hi.
Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
And Malika is a project manager for the Washington State Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Expansion Team with the Public Defenders Association, and also a project director for Voices of Community Activists and Leaders, otherwise known as VOCAL. We'll talk more about both of those efforts in a moment. She's a founding member of the Washington Association of Syringe Service Programs and Full Circle United. She's a founding member of Full Circle United. This is just a snippet of your bio. I could go on and on. We could do the whole show. But today she's here also in her role as a steering committee executive member of the Thurston Asset Building Coalition. For over 20 years, Malika has worked to address social determinants of health and consults and educates on issues related to public health and justice. Malika's work is all about partnerships, coalition, education, interconnection, service, and justice. So Malika, welcome.
Thank you.
And also thank you for your work in Olympia and more widely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you. My name is Corey. I'm program manager for Interfaith Relations with Interfaith Works. And we're meeting today, Malika and I are meeting because Malika is one of our featured guests for an upcoming event of Interfaith Works on September 21st. September 21st is the United Nations International Day of Peace, and Interfaith Works is recognizing that day with a live online event that will feature 3 regional leaders from Olympia. Malika is one of those persons, and we invite you to that event. You can check it out on Facebook and find the contact information and the registration on our website for that event. It's a free event. It'll probably be about an hour plus event, and we're really excited. And again, that's September 21st, this coming Monday. So great. So Malika, thanks for being here. Thanks for making time to visit today. Appreciate you, appreciate your work. And I wanted to ask, of all the things that I listed today, where are you maybe the most engaged or the most busy right now with all of these endeavors?
I'd say probably my top endeavors that I'm working on right now are, of course, my day job working with the Washington State expansion of law enforcement assisted diversion. We're working with the Washington Association of Sheriff and Police Chiefs Arrest and Jail Alternatives grant that came out of the legislature's House Bill 1767, working with jurisdictions across the state to develop diversion programs for people with behavioral health issues, to get them in to help develop systems of care in community to be able to address those behavioral health issues and the law violations that often result as a product of those. And also with my work, there was also the governor's opioid response bill. That also funded part of our work with the healthcare authority to do lead expansion across the state. So working with several jurisdictions across the state to get lead or lead-like programs stood up in their area. Mason County is one of the areas that we're working with. We're also working with Olympia Police Department, Walla Walla, and Snohomish County, Whatcom County, so a number of places across the state. And then also also my work with the Asset Building Coalition.
Yeah.
I'm the chair of the Asset Building Coalition, and we believe that asset building is not just having money in your pocket, but that, or property, but that we recognize that there's a multi-pronged approach to people being able to have whole life asset. So we recognize that housing is an important part of being able to stabilize in your life. We also recognize that safety and health, as well as access to safe and healthy food, and then opportunities for economic advancement. So I am the chair of our Health and Safety Net, as well as one of the chairs, along with Christina Mullen out of Mason County. We have a regional approach. And then also the Thurston Asset Building Coalition is also the chair for that. So, and then as far as and then working for with Black Leaders of Action and Solidarity in Thurston County, that's another thing that I'm working closely with as well right now.
Okay. Well, if we can, I'd like to kind of scroll back to the front end of that description you talked about, especially with the LEAD program that you're working with, and because a lot of your work that you described in that first part before we got to the Asset Building Coalition is about harm reduction.
Right.
I'm wondering if you could, before we go into some of the specifics of the LEAD, which I really would like to explore in terms of what's happening up in King County, but also what's happening here in Olympia and some of the things we've seen with police activity in Olympia. Could we start with just a general understanding of what is a concept of harm reduction, and where would you place that in terms of a social expression?
Harm reduction, it is in its most basic form meeting people where they are, with the understanding that we don't leave them there. But we don't necessarily prescribe where people are going to go. Harm reduction is about self-determination, and initially, oftentimes that does involve empowerment, with individuals. But recognizing that it is not just that; it is about empowering a person to the level that they become self-determined. It isn't our job to, as harm reductionists, and I believe as humans, to tell other people what to do. It is our job to support each other so that people can reach self-actualization.
Determination.
And so also my work with Voices of Community Activists and Leaders, that I'm the director of that program, that's also another part of my day job. So, that is very much about harm reduction. It's about building political power within marginalized groups, so people that experience homelessness or have experienced homelessness, people that experience other behavioral health issues related to substances or mental health or both, people that have experienced HIV and AIDS, people that have experienced mass incarceration and racism, and so recognizing that, our initial engagements with people are about building community, because that's one of the first forms with which we can empower each other, and that's something that harm reduction recognizes as well. We recognize that taking a lens towards racial justice, harm reduction is a racial justice movement as well, and it is a framework with which we can build a moral approach to supporting people, all people, and recognizing we need to meet people where they are, but most importantly, our most marginalized individuals in our communities, so people that use drugs. We recognize that, substance use is something that illicit and illicit substance use, for better or for worse, is in our communities, and that people need to be able to be safe. And we recognize the value in that. We recognize the value of people's humanity.
What strikes me when I hear that is that this focus on the individual and empowerment, and it strikes me as being different to kind of normal methods of telling people to conform to law, or to be subject to the law, especially people who are suffering and who are addicted and working with mental health issues, compounding and poverty, all of those kinds of issues. That they seem to be just byproducts of a law and order system that really makes it almost impossible for them, once they're engaged in the system, to go beyond it and to find that self-determination, that self-empowerment piece that your harm reduction model talks about. So it's very inspiring.
And we also recognize that we work towards changing those systems and policies. at a moral framework, that was some of the components that I was describing. There's more to it, obviously, than that, but we recognize that the notions of legal and illegal are can oftentimes be social constructs that are part of a larger system that is designed to oppress people.
Yeah.
And so we believe in responding to that in order to try and change it. And I'm also involved with a group called Faith and Harm Reduction that believes in radical compassion and meeting people where they are, but not leaving them there. But if they choose that they don't want to be there, and if they can't and maybe aren't ready to move, that we can stand with you until you get to that place of wanting to progress along the cycle of behavior change to a different location.
Yeah, so often the persons who we cite as like legal drug users. I mean, that Michelle Alexander in her book New Jim Crow points out that drug use is pretty much consistent throughout all socioeconomic levels, right? But persons who aren't housed are public people, and so we witness that, and oftentimes they become the quickest objects of enforcement from law that wants to take them away from the public that's pressuring them to remove that from our visage, right? And so I'm curious about this concept of changing systems. I wonder if we could come back into the lead work that you're doing, and we've established I think at least a basic model of what harm reduction is. How does that look when we approach a system like policing? What happens when a police department or a unit or squad or whomever actually comes into contact with a harm reduction teaching? What does that actually look like, and how does it change the system? What system are we dealing with, and how does it change through a harm reduction education?
So to be clear, LEAD is not necessarily a system change. It is a way to do something different within the system that is currently existing. And it can become a runway to system change if community decides to move in that direction. Community and systems, recognizing that it happens on generally a hyper-local level, and that an entity within the police department has decided that continuing to do business as usual, engaging with people that are publicly experiencing their behavioral health issues and putting them into jail is not a cycle that is working for anyone, and it's compounding the trauma of the individuals that are subject to it, and that engaging people in the model of care that LEAD has helped to develop, which is a harm reduction based model of care that outreach workers engage with people in the field that are instead of the police. And so the police are referring people into the program, and then they are being collectively approved by a group of individuals that are involved in that program that are from the community, the hyperlocal community, and then there's an agreement that that individual is going to be engaged with this different way of caring for people, and so that coordinated case management, it's coordination of care for our most vulnerable, oftentimes, and people that are experiencing the most profound behavioral health issues. There's a collective recognition by everybody at the table that the person didn't get to that place quickly, and that moving them to a different place is going to take some time, and it's going to take rapport and relationship building, and all the while there's going to be this intense system of care available to that individual, with the recognition that continuing to engage them in the system as usual is not working. Oftentimes communities have found that works better, and so that becomes the way that they do things. But like I said, it's a runway for system change. It is a harm reduction mechanism to interrupt the harm that is perpetuated by business as usual.
If we were to build like a hypothetical scenario of a person who engages with the police, let's say, in a business as usual fashion, then they engage with the lead. Look, can we try to do that? Like, let's create a person.
Mm-hmm.
What is their? Who are they? What's their situation that they would be involved with the police? Let's create scenario A of the business as usual, and then scenario B, so we can get a deeper understanding of this.
So when LEAD was originally designed it was law enforcement, Lisa Dugard, who's our executive director for the Public Defender Association,
Mm-hmm.
Chris Nyrock, who was our harm reduction director, and then also Eileen Corcoran, who was the outreach worker and a social worker. She actually graduated in the same class as Meg Martin, and rest her soul, she's not with us anymore, but she developed the case management model, and she was an individual with lived experience.
She had lived experience.
Yes, and this particular model was designed to intervene in Seattle, where they're in one particular area called Belltown, where 60% of the drug arrests at that time were of black men, and but black people in general only made about 6 to 8% of the population.
Yeah.
So there was a huge disparity.
Yeah.
So this was in response to that racial disparity, because up to that point there had just been like lawsuits against the city government for racial disparity, but nothing had really changed. And it was actually the police officer that was involved in that thought group that was like, well, what would we do different? What would you do different if we were going to do something different? And then that's where the lead care model was born, or where it started to be born. And so business as usual would be that a person was in a neighborhood using drugs, and they would get arrested, and then they would get let out, and then they'd probably get arrested again, and they would get out. Yeah, and there might be a trip to the hospital. What's different with LEAD is that if there's an individual that law enforcement encounters, and they're experiencing their behavioral health issues, and they it's generally nonviolent offenses, that person, that then whatever charge was going to be levied against that person would be diverted in a pre-booking manner, so it's a pre-booking diversion, and then that person is referred, and then the outreach worker is called in, and they engage with that person, and they start establishing rapport with them, and then they start to engage them in that care cycle. So that's how it's different. Also, there's a social contact mechanism, social contact referral mechanism within LEAD, and that law enforcement actually came up with that because there were people that were running to them saying, look, I have some crack, could you please arrest me so that I can get into that program? Or can you please refer me into that program? And they were like, well, we know that they might not be, at the moment we see them engaging in a law violation, but they could really benefit from this service, or this set suite of services and this coordinated care. And so they began referring people in to LEAD through a social contact referral. We also, in some areas, the community gets to directly refer people into this mode of care as well. And the people are approved by a group, it's called the Operational Work Group, and those are the people that are oftentimes closest to, the work, and that's outreach workers, project managers, prosecutor, and law enforcement. And the individual is approved or not approved into the program when their name is brought forth. In the past, it was only law enforcement that could approve or not approve an individual, but we recognize that gatekeeping role in light of COVID-19, in light of many of the other things that are going on nationally and locally, that it would probably be and also that communities were like, can we please refer people in? So then that gatekeeping role has been changed in Seattle, and we're also recommending it for any other sites that are launching or have already established a program, that there be more than one way to get a person into LEAD, and the community can directly refer people without having to rely on law enforcement to come and let them in or to approve this program.
It's great. I mean, it's recognizing and acknowledging that addiction issues are a public health issue, and which can express itself in criminal activity. But first and foremost, it's a public health issue that impacts all people, especially the persons who are suffering from it.
Mhm.
You mentioned Olympia at the beginning of our conversation about LEAD. Is there a development of a program here, or is there an existing LEAD program? I'm not aware of one at this time. And I know that what we have currently with the downtown city and the ambassador program feels a little different, and maybe has less resource base behind it for referrals and for connected, coordinated care for the persons.
So the 1767, House Bill 1767 was the funding stream that was given to WASPIC, Washington Association of Sheriff and Police Chiefs, and the city of, to work with jurisdictions that applied for that funding and were approved to develop diversion programs or arrest and jail alternative programs. So something that was an alternative to arrest and jail for people with behavioral health issues, or how they decided to design them in their communities or in the community. PDA, Public Defender Association, and so myself and my coworker Kim Hendrickson were assigned to provide technical assistance about the LEAD model, because that was the model of diversion and care that was written into that particular House bill. And so we are working with the City of Olympia was awarded one of those grants, and they already have their Familiar Faces program, and they were recognizing that there needed to be, that there was a gap in care between those initial crisis response calls that were happening and some ongoing support that people may need. And they were trying to provide that, but they had a very limited budget, so this funding opportunity was a way to be able to expand into that care. And so we have been working with them on arrest and jail alternatives as that next step of care beyond that initial crisis response. And we've been working with the team that includes outreach work, peer outreach, people with lived experience, and also law enforcement, as well as the city's project management team and the Catholic Community Services project management team.
Okay, it's a wide coalition. Yeah. It's an exciting development.
Yeah.
Part of your work too, in terms of the public health and harm reduction model, is concerned with opioid use and public health issues around syringe use and drugs. And one of the issues I was curious to talk with you about today is the safe consumption sites. I mean, this is a politically charged topic, like many public health issues have become these days. Never mind the data, right? But I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that. I mean, it's public opioid use is an issue in our city. And I was curious to know how you would frame a conversation about safe consumption sites, even linking it to any kind of harm reduction model.
Well, safe consumption is totally based on a harm reduction model. And the Public Defender Association, and actually my predecessor, the director of Vocal, Patricia Sully, she successfully, she and the membership of Vocal Washington successfully got funding allocated by the City of Seattle, but that funding has never been moved into creating a space. Jesse Rollins, one of my coworkers at the Public Defender Association, has been working focused more on Seattle on trying to move them. I've been collaborating with him on that work to move that money to create places for people to be safe, because at its core, this is a safety issue. We are in the midst of an overdose crisis. We have been for quite some time. I would call it a poisoning crisis. People do not have access to a safe supply of substance, nor do they have a place that where what we have in our current supply, they can be safe if they are using it. And also, in turn, there's a safe place for the disposal of the materials that are used in a safe injection experience. But this is about safety, and it's about keeping people alive to live their lives,
Mhm.
and if living their lives means that they get to a place where they don't want to use substances anymore, okay, but if
Mhm.
it doesn't, then their life is inherently, worthwhile,
Mhm.
period.
Mhm.
And that is,
That's the baseline.
that's the baseline.
Yeah.
And safe consumption is about, having a place where people can access healthcare that they can engage in without stigma.
Yeah.
It's a place for people to, if they want to engage in other services,
Mhm.
but it's also, it's just a place where they can, use the substances that they have decided that they need in
Mhm.
order, or that their bodies are dependent upon
Overcome, yeah.
in a manner that is safe for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What we found at Interfaith Works is a low barrier model is also a chance for engagement where other services that might potentially benefit and help lift a person can be available to them. Why do you think that safe consumption sites have so much energy, so much charge, and why are they so politically hot?
I think that we have a prohibition-based system in our country, and so we have for a very long time spent a lot of time, effort, money, and government will to marginalize people. We have a drug war. We've invested a lot in that, and there has, as a result of our collective ignorance as a country around substance use, and our collective investment in the things that are at the root of the drug war, racism and stigma, that we fight each other. I mean, I think that we're at a place where the polarization in our country has been unveiled in a manner with which it hasn't been seen in a long time.
Yeah.
And but people that use drugs, especially black and brown people that use drugs, and that come from communities where some would say drugs were intentionally brought to, have been experiencing that marginalization for a very long time. And it is, but supervised consumption sites are something that has brought the issue into the collective consciousness in a way that it wasn't before. And in the atmosphere of stigma that we have, people believe it to be a permissive stance to something that they have very strong feelings about. However, when people begin to think about things a little more objectively, that we use substances every single day. Like if I hadn't had some coffee before I came here today, we'd be having a very different conversation.
We might just be silently here on the
Looking
camera.
at each other.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sad.
and I mean,
It's true.
and if people, I often use the metaphor of like when you had that glass of wine in your living room, that was your safe consumption space. The substance you were using was legal, but that was your safe consumption space. And for people that are homeless, which we are on the precipice of having numbers of homeless people that we have probably never seen in this country as a result of what we're going through with the mismanagement of COVID-19. I think that we're just going to see that it's going to be worse. And I mean, people using substances are a coping mechanism. And when you compound the impact that our systems have had on people by making things illegal, if you have a problem with your substance use, but then you also have a legal problem, that just makes it worse. And it makes it that much harder for people to engage in the care that they need.
And this then goes from a public health issue to an issue related to incarceration. I mean, you mentioned before the disproportionate rates, not just of policing. Let's roll it back just a little bit. There's the disproportionate, of incarceration, the disproportionate rates of policing in communities of black and brown people, and arrests for possession or use of drugs. Though those rates of consumption are consistent throughout socioeconomic levels, the rates of policing and arrest are disproportionately skewed towards a concentration on communities that are black and brown. This is not a new trend, but it costs first of all those communities a huge toll, especially with impact on incarceration with black and brown men, who is disproportionately compared to white men are incarcerated away from their families for rates of sentencing that are not the same that white men receive, or even for types of substances. So this is a huge issue. That's the safe consumption sites are one aspect of it, but the policing element in places where those aren't available is an enormous impact on our society.
Well, I mean, there are no legal safe consumption spaces anywhere in the United States.
Well, Canada bars, maybe, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
about that.
Yes,
right.
But I mean, as far as like for illicit substances, there are none in this country that are legal. And you know, when we talk about the over-policing of people, these systems were designed to oppress black and brown people. I mean, you know, oftentimes people do not want to talk about the genesis of modern day policing is directly related to slave patrols. And that model of patrolling people, those models were developed to patrol black people. And I mean, it's a recent advent after the Civil War that policing was something that the American people even wanted. Before that, they were not. That was not something that was wanted in America, because they remembered what it was like in Europe when there were systems of policing. But then the system of policing that was adopted here was directly based on the slave patrols. The increase in policing was directly related to the Civil War and the end of the Civil War, and the need to find ways to control the newly freed urban hordes, quote unquote, code word for black people. Anyway, that, you know, migrated to the north, and that became the response. And you know, when I've had these conversations at times with some people in the field of law enforcement, there is sometimes some resistance to that, and it's like it's history, and it's an opportunity for us to learn how to do something different. You know, and I think that if we can start having like informed conversations with each other, then we can start coming up with informed and relevant ways to address, you know, the issues that we're facing. And but if we can't look at the truth and the history behind where we are right now, we're not going to be able to move to any form of reconciliation.
Yeah. Instead of just taking an emotional affront to it and having that be the wall through which I will not participate in a conversation that might you know, show some light on my institution as a police person. Say, I mean, this is the problem. Yeah.
Well, it's more than just the institution of policing. It's all of our institutions in this country are based on, you know, the stealing of land from indigenous people and the stealing of people from the continent of Africa that were then enslaved to come and work the land that was stolen. Like, if we can't start at some baseline where we recognize these things, that this is the legacy of this country, and what we're seeing right now are the modern day symptoms of it. Like, that's what I mean by, like, there has to be some sort of if we're going to have, you know, truth and reconciliation process where we can move into what we're talking about today, which is peace.
Yeah. And we're in a moment right now where I think the public writ large is seeing some of the visceral expressions of what happens when a black life is taken by police, and the videos keep coming and keep coming and keep coming, and the idea of truth, when's that going to settle in to where the point where we all can own up and grab the rope and do some of this reform work, you know? When we're in this topic right now, how do you interpret the times and what's happening right now? You know, maybe a couple options are hopeful. Are you cautious? How are you feeling and intuiting this moment?
I feel tired, because this impacts me. This impacts my family, and you know, because of who we are in the world. also, I see an opportunity, especially like harm reductionists, we have been working to try and create a lot of the changes that people have been leaning towards, or because there was just this idea of like not knowing what to do once COVID-19 hit. And it's like, oh, well, we've actually kind of been preparing for this for a while. You know, we've been in the midst of an epidemic for quite some time. Here, this is what we think, you know, should happen. So I do believe that, and we are in the midst of a syndemic now, you know, like multiple things are coming together all at once. And I think this is an opportunity to respond in a relevant way. I think this is an opportunity to scale work that has been happening in smaller ways throughout our communities, and that oftentimes is rooted in a harm reduction modality, even if it isn't necessarily called that. Because I often say that, like, for example, people of color, we've been doing harm reduction in our communities forever, you know, because there has always been a woeful lack of resources, you know, allocated to addressing the issues that we face, and that all of us face, but that we face disproportionately or more intensely. And we have ways to respond to that. So you know, you're seeing movements like Decriminalize, you know, Seattle, and other that are really putting forward practical ways to address behavioral health issues. And I think it's an opportunity.
You mentioned the word tired. And I was reading an article by Samajai Best in Huffington Post in the week following the death of Chadwick Boseman. She's a black woman. She was saying, fighting for your life every day is draining. Figuring out ways of being that seem less threatening so as to increase your chances of making a home to your family is tiresome. Knowing that at any moment of any day, the very people who are supposed to protect and serve could kill you without cause or repercussion, that recurring thought is maddening. Black Americans are tired.
Ditto. Yes, all of that.
Yeah. I just was curious to ask you how you keep going your work, let alone what we just talked about with the weight of all of that. But your work also you hold a lot of heavy stuff in your work. Where are your sources of strength for keeping going, having an orienting purpose, finding strength?
I think my family, like my daughters, my friends, my community. I often, like, people will be like, oh, thank you, or you did such and such, and I'm like, I'm a reflection of my community. I'm a reflection of the best things, and I am also, just my community as a whole, you know. And I feel fortunate to be a part of my community, locally and globally. And also, to me, it just isn't an option not to do something. Like, it's not an option to quit. That's not a privilege I have. I do have enough privilege in this world that sometimes I get to take a break and I get to rest. And I recognize that and I'm grateful for it. But I don't have the option to quit.
In our other conversations, you used the phrase that your work is, you look at it as like paying rent for being a citizen, and I just thought that was just the most beautiful phrase and most inspiring thing I've heard in a long time.
I do believe that it is my rent for being on this planet, like a citizen of this global community. There's a quote, I don't remember all of it, but it's that we're walking each other home, and that we're and that we belong to each other, you know, and I take that commitment seriously.
Yeah, I know that quote too. It's on the tip.
Mhm.
Beautiful. As you do your work and as you abide in community and make those ties, are there any people that you look to who have been examples or role models, or sometimes, I even think about people that I just feel like in my bones, right? They're really with me in the work, and they've been mentors, but they've come into my life at a deep level of self and a deep level of identity, a place of like belonging in the world. There's a little handful of people that I think of who really are with me in my goings and comings through the world. And I'm just curious, as we journey with you into your work and your world, are there people that are with you that are mentors that have guided you and you want to name in your work and in your life?
I call them my ancestors, whether they're here still on this plane or not.
Yeah.
But yes, I definitely have. My grandmothers were very, like, Mercedes Lamont and Betty Barkey. Those were people that were very crucial in like shaping me as a human being. And my mom, Becky Lamont. I also Pawnee Brown. I consider him my mentor in the harm reduction. He's my dad in the harm reduction movement. He's the one who gave me a name for the stuff I had been doing like my whole career. And but I didn't know and I didn't understand that it was part of this larger global effort. And I totally credit him with my connection to this community.
Is he still living?
Yes, he is. And Chris Nyrop, I mentioned him earlier. He was the director of harm reduction practices at PDA for quite some time. He helped shape and form the LEAD program. Malika Blair, she's another individual that when I first started doing counseling work, she brought me into a group, her healing circle, and really helped shape me as an individual that was working to try and create healing, for other people, and then also helped heal me. Bridget Fitzgerald, she's no longer with us, but she is another individual from this community that Dr. Yu, Diana Yu, that's another person that, handed me some public health chops. That is who I learned my public health, framework and understanding from. I mean, the list goes on there. So if I've forgotten anybody, it's not because of, credit it to my mind, not my heart. So, there's just Heather Rambo. It's like, she's my best friend. She's also a nurse a harm reduction nurse, and we met through syringe exchange work. There's just so many people in this community that, and the broader community that I'm grateful for and that have influenced me.
Thank you. Yeah, just being with you, hearing about your life and your work, I'm actually not surprised to hear such a wide, cloud of people who are around you, and mentors and people who've guided and supported you, so thanks to all those people. Yeah, thanks for mentioning the ancestors too. A powerful and maybe underrated aspect available to all of us of our lives. Yeah. So before we begin to wrap up, one of the questions that we're asking folks related to the event on the 21st is, what is peace to you? So I'll ask you, Malika, what is peace to you?
I probably have, as we've discussed, a more radical notion of peace. And then I believe that peace is justice, and that peace is maybe it's the resting place and it's the destination, but there's a lot that can be involved in that journey that may look very restless in order to get us there. And so that's where that radical notion of peace comes from for me. And I recognize that it may not be something that I ever see, but I'm going to fight for it for my kid and for everybody else's kids.
I'm struck by your use of the word rest again, like it's a resting place, and we'll be restless until we move to there. That's powerful imagery, and I thank you for that, and I see you building peace in your work, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Malika will be one of 3 guests at the upcoming Peace Day event on September 21st. Our other 2 featured guests that day are Parfait Basile. He is the director of the Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Center at South Puget Sound Community College, and then Jay Banks, who's the executive director with Pizza Clash. And we'll have a conversation kind of similar to what we had today, but we'll be on screens together, and we'll journey into the idea of what is peace. And Malika, Parfait, and Jay are each working in organizations and efforts that I think are focused on justice. We're going to talk about at the Peace Day the absolute dependency of justice as the supportive attribute without which peace cannot exist. And so I just want to again thank you, Malika, for coming by today and being a guest on our show.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh yeah, it's so good to talk with you. So good. And so let me make sure I do this right for the outro. Our next show is September 29th. The executive director of Interfaith Works, Meg Martin, will be doing an exploration of self-care and community care during the time of COVID. And I believe she's going to have a guest with her to help reflect on those aspects of care in the midst of the pandemic we're going through. And you can check out our website and our Facebook page to see a rebroadcast of this episode and to get in touch with what we're doing as an organization. And then again, Malika and Parfait and Jay and others will be together on September 21st at 5 p.m. and we'll be live on Facebook. So please join us. And Malika, again, thank you for being here. Thanks for your time and your work in the world.
Thank you.
And thanks to you all for being here, and have a great day.